Glenn Marshall Rambo was born on December 4th, 1970, in Alice, Jim Wells County, Texas. His father was Gary W. Rambo, and mother Rebecca Ann Rourke. Though he had siblings on his mother's side, I'm unsure if there are any on his father's side. There wasn't a whole lot I could find about Glenn's life, other than some old forum posts that had talked of him posthumously. On my death space, there was a post from the user Puke, who copied and pasted a letter/description about Glenn Rambo and the life that he lived. Glenn was raised by his mother and grandmother in Violet, Louisiana, St. Bernard Parish, the New Orleans area. He was blessed, yet cursed, with a unique appearance which some found strange or evil, and would lead him to be harassed on a daily basis by closed-minded law enforcement and those who called him and his family witches. Others in St. Bernard would always see Glenn walking everywhere, with a big boom box on his shoulder, taking his time and listening to his music. He soon acquired the affectionate nickname Lilac Ozzy. Finding a safe haven connecting with freaks like himself and the growing underground hardcore punk metal scene in New Orleans. Eventually starting a band called Nuclear Crucifixion in the mid-'80s with friends Donovan Punch, Brian Patton, Dave Moran, and Darren Schallenberg. This band would eventually morph into the early iterations of Soilent Green. Their shows would be memorable not only for their ahead-of-their-time fusion style, but also Glenn's outrageous stage persona. He was a true performance artist, as recalled, and would eventually end up singing with bands like Nonmolesters, GM Pussy Bitch, and Swarm. Glenn is remembered as the guy that knew every lyric, every riff, and who had such an extensive knowledge of music in general that you could talk to him for hours and hours, and he'd just keep recommending new bands, or pulling out obscure and arcane types of music you may not have heard of. Despite people thinking that he was sinister, he was actually one of the most genuine, loving, intelligent people you'd ever meet. He's remembered for his dark and piercing appearance, while also having an absolutely hypnotic speaking voice. Low, modulated, and subtle, a true Southern gentleman. Glenn loved reading, obtaining information, and devoured books. He was always thirsty for knowledge and a deeper understanding of spirituality. No garden variety Satanist, Glenn was more interested in human nature and all its darkness. Wise beyond his years, he was also very sensitive. You could talk to him seriously about any number of subjects. He also had a keen sense of humor and a sense of absurdity. Glenn was a lover of animals, who he adopted a whole flock and called them his babies. He'd walk around the French Quarter with his beloved ferret stuffed in his pockets, sneaking up his jacket, curled around his neck. Glenn had epilepsy, which caused him to be on meds his whole life. The condition gave him seizures, but he considered it a blessing in disguise because it gave him visions that other people couldn't see. His mother had epilepsy too. He could take something potentially tragic and turn it into something unique and magical. When he'd see you, he'd come over to you, give you a hug and a kiss. Glenn is recalled as a healing presence, a truly enchanting soul. Glenn stayed in Violet, Louisiana, because he and his mother didn't have a car. His leg was broken, and he didn't have anywhere to evacuate to. He thought that they could just bear down and ride out the storm. They may not have wanted to leave the comfort of their home when they didn't have anywhere to go to. But when the levees broke, they didn't stand a chance. One of his favorite quotes was, "Invoke me under my stars. Love is the law, love under will. Nor let the fools mistake love, for there are love and love. There is the dove, and there is the serpent. Choose ye well. He, my prophet, hath knowing the law of the fortress, and the great mystery of the house of God." Aleister Crowley. On the Metal Archives, Glenn's musical history is still rather vague. It lists that he sang for the bands mentioned before, though the only ones with dates on them or links seems to be Soilent Green and Nuclear Crucifixion as of June 2023. I'm not sure what the exact time frame was for the other bands. Nuclear Crucifixion is listed as having been from New Orleans, Louisiana. One source states Metairie in particular. They formed in 1987 and lasted through 1988, though the archive also states 1989. I don't know the info about that specifically. This iteration of the band had 2 demos, the first being Killing Ourselves to Live in 1987, and the second being Torture of Humanity in 1988. The former starts with the songs titled Nuclear Vomit, which was later reworked into some Soilent Green songs like Numb Around the Heart. Both demo releases were on cassette, no label. The band was also listed as being spelled Crucifixion with a T, and at some point it was called Seventh. The band's music was really underground, with this general old-school death metal feel, which is right on par with the nearby Florida death metal scene that exploded around that time period. Though it may seem obvious to people my age and older, for the younger audience, it seems that the band's name was inspired by the idea of nuclear fallout. During this time period in the U.S., with the Cold War, many pieces of media reflect this fear. The first to come to mind, to me, is actually Retaliation by Carnivore. The first NC demo was spelled, of course, Nuclear Crucifixion with the T. The band photo that is found on the Metal Archives was taken by Al Hodge of Tungsten in what was Donovan Punch's grandmother's garage. The garage was where they practiced, the area previously having been used as a dance studio by his grandmother. Soilent Green also practiced there when they formed, and in the early 90s, Jason Pizzolato's band Apostasy would play shows with Soilent Green. While Nonmolesters isn't listed as its own page on the Metal Archives or Discogs, a few videos from Jason Pizzolato states the band at having played from about 1989 to 1991. I assume that this was virtually a name change for the band, Nuclear Crucifixion, since it had similar members. Though maybe it wasn't, I honestly have no idea. And still, the band had a man named Joey Hall who was on vocals for the demos and shows, but it should be noted that the band would switch instruments and invite friends and audience members to join in. Glenn is actually listed as having played drums here. Glenn would include their Nonmolester recordings at the end of some of the demo tapes for Soilent Green that he dubbed and sold. As Pizzolato said, classic Nonmolester songs include We Like Smoking Weed and Big Pussy. Joey Hall is listed as having later become a cop. Nonmolester seemed like a hilarious band to see live, as the videos were quite silly, well, the demos, or videos of the demos. Anyway, though musically great, the eloquence of "I like to eat vagina" cannot be understated. Or maybe that was Nuclear Crucifixion that said that? Whatever. A video from the amazing and, how do I say this, saving my ass in a way, the great and resourceful Acid Bath Archive, actually shows a small snippet in time of Nuclear Crucifixion's life, where Glenn Rambo and Brian Patton were interviewed. The interview was from Pagan Fest, July 22nd, 1988, which took place in Dallas, Texas. A cassette of the first Nuclear Crucifixion demo is shown, with some footage of the band playing. Glenn stated that they decided to play at Pagan Fest because they really liked Dallas and how the people would listen to the music and accept it for what it was instead of denying it for what it ain't. When asked if he'd still help underground bands if they got famous, Glenn said that he absolutely would.
Nuclear Crucifixion for you here. What's it called? Torture of Humanity.
Nuclear Crucifixion, and we from New Orleans. We like to rock here because, you know, we can't get too many gigs out in New Orleans. You know.
Brian Patton, lead guitars.
Why did you decide to play this festival?
Because we really like Dallas. We like...
It kicks.
Yeah, it really kicks. And, yeah, the people are really cool out here. It's not like, everybody wants to, put you down for the music you play, you know. But they, you know, they listen to it and they accept it for what it is instead of denying it for what it ain't, you know.
If you ever become successful, like getting on a record label, will you still support underground local bands?
You bet, definitely. I definitely
Yeah, definitely.
How would you support them?
I would help them get record contracts. Support them, put money, invest in them, you know.
In 1988, Soilent Green was formed. Also having Rambo, of course, the band's first iteration consisted of him, Brian Patton, Donovan Punch, Marcel Trenchard, and Tommy Buckley. Some of the earliest demos, as posted by Jason Pizzolatto, state that Soilent formed after the ashes of Nuclear Crucifixion. Once again, the time frame is a little confusing, and I don't know if Nonmolesters was its own separate entity from Soilent. The Middle Archive states that Soilent was formed after Rambo, Punch, and Patton left Nuclear Crucifixion, though I'm unsure what their reasons are for why they left that band. And really, what happened to Crucifixion afterwards? Because I have no idea of what, I guess, form or who was even left in playing it, because it seems to have died once the others left. The early iteration of Soilent Green is vastly different from the records we know today. A 1989 demo provides a thrashy feel, and the ones from 1990 have that underground, early death metal feel. The tracks posted by Pizzolatto remind me a lot of Macabre's album Dahmer, which actually came out 10 years after those. Early Soilent had this fantastic death metal feel, which could have really turned them into a major forerunner of the genre, at least in my eyes. Or, I guess you could say, ears. Anyway, it feels like the sound that they achieved in 1990 seemed to be somewhere that Glenn wanted to achieve, as his vocals settled into the death range, and to me, I really thought that they were great. I'm reminded a lot of bands like Ripping Corpse, Death, and Baphomet, just to name a few from that time period of like the mid-late 80s kind of sound. It almost makes me sad that this iteration of the band didn't continue on, you know, and the sound that the Soilent demos had reminded me of something you would hear as kind of like a background soundtrack to some sort of really brutal and gruesome cartoon or even anime. I could honestly, in a strange way, imagine the Soilent Green demos playing over the Italian version of the Fist of the North Star movie, where there's tons of guts and gore. Anyway. In 1989, the band released their first demo, which was on cassette. According to the videos of the demo by Pizzolatto, the demo was recorded at ProTech Productions in Marrero, Louisiana. In 1991, a demo was released called Satanic Drug Fog, which was recorded in 1990 in Baytown, Texas. This was actually recorded at the same time as their other demo, Squiggly, and Squiggly is also known as Squiggly Demons and Soilent Green. Both were on cassette. 10 songs were recorded total, with 2 being left off the tapes. I'm not sure why, let alone what happened to those songs. In 1991, a 7-inch vinyl was released that had 4 songs, one being from Soilent Green. The song was Circle of Death, which was on side B. The other songs included were Waiting in Silence by Slugs, Worldview by Sick, and Brainwashed Society by The Detriments. Interesting to note, too, is that Slugs was the band that Kirk Winstein and Todd Strange were in before it turned into Crowbar.
To all the people that don't like death metal, this band isn't for you. So you might as well leave. Alright? Alright. All I have to say is for people that don't like death metal and they like to put it down and they don't fucking like to give it a chance, I tell them to fucking suck my fucking dick and fucking this band fucking rules. And I don't give a fuck what you say about how he sings, fucking or how heavy he fucking is. Cause y'all fucking suck my fucking dick. This is fucking paralysis, motherfucker. Get away from me, man! This song's called Torture.
In 1992, Soilent Green released a demo, though there's no official art or title for the project. An interesting note about this demo, though, is that Donovan Punch had broken his arm the night before at an ex-Hoarder concert and couldn't play guitar. As such, he has only backing vocals. Pizzolatto was friends with the guys, and he and his brother listened to a cassette that Punch brought of the recordings so they could record the guitar parts from him. This demo was to be released in 7-inch format by Relapse Records, but it never happened. Years later, the band ended up putting out a handful of releases on the label. This demo would be the last to feature Glenn Rambo, and as far as I know, might have been the last piece of music that he'd ever record. I'm not sure why or how Glenn Rambo ended up leaving Soilent Green, but in 1993, he was replaced with Ben Falgout. In an interview with Richard Metalfan in May of 2023, Ben stated that he'd help Soilent when they'd play shows in the Texas area. During this time period, he was still in his other band, Paralysis. Ben stated that there was some kind of situation with their singer at the time, there being Soilent Green's, and so they had parted ways, which later on Ben was offered to join. But overall, I'm not sure what the reason was, let alone what happened to Glenn after that. Between the years of 1992 and 2005, I have no idea what might have happened in his life, though it doesn't seem like he created anything musically. On August 29th, 2005, Glenn passed away, having been found dead in his mother's home. His ex-girlfriend Stacy and some National Guardsmen went to his mother's house because they hadn't heard from them since Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. The bodies of Glenn and his mother were still in the house. A friend named Melissa posted on the now defunct website NOLA Underground saying, "Glenn had a broken leg, and he and his mom had no car to evacuate. If you know them, you probably know that his family didn't have much money. I'm not sure where they're going to bury them, or if there are any next of kin that could help. Maybe we could all take up a collection to make sure that they are buried properly and have grave markers. I don't even know how to go about doing something like that. It just makes me sad to think that after we have all lost so much, we are now finding out that we have lost good friends as well. Glenn was an important part on the NOLA scene, and a good friend to many of us. He will be dearly missed and fondly remembered. With love and sadness, Melissa. October 2nd, 2005. Glenn M. Rambo was buried at St. Bernard Memorial Gardens in Chalmette, Louisiana. He was 34. His mother, Rebecca Ann Rourke, was buried in the same location. She was 61. They were survived by family, as listed in their obituaries, which was posted by the Times-Picayune on January 3rd, 2006. Their funerals were on January 4th, 2006. Glenn's death was a shock to many, as there are still accounts online which have blogged or commented about their sadness. One in particular is Paranoise, who was friends with Glenn and played shows with him in the past. While Glenn may not have spent that much time on Earth, I believe that it's still important to acknowledge his influence on the music scene. Going through the history of Soilent Green and the music before that point, it's clear that his musical endeavors helped form the eventual NOLA sludge scene, which grew to prominence in the 90s. My heart goes out to his friends and family. I can only pay my respects and say thank you for everything he made. Thank you, Glenn. And I hope that you may rest in peace. This write-up and video would not be possible without the Metal Archives, the Acid Bath Archive, and most importantly, Jason Pizzolato. I want to thank you all so very, very much. I also want to thank Paranoise for, honestly, more than anything, keeping his blog and website up for, God, almost 20 years, if not more. So once again, thank you to everybody. And thank you for watching this video.